The mass media are anti-mediatory and intransitive. They fabricate non-communication. This is what characterizes them. If one agrees to define communication as an exchange, as a reciprocal space of a speech and a response, and thus of a responsibility, not a psychological or moral responsibility, but a personal, mutual correlation and exchange. We must understand communication as something other than the simple transmission-reception of a message, whether or not the latter is considered reversible through feedback. Now, the totality of the existing architecture of the media founds itself on this latter definition. They are what always prevents response, making all processes of exchange impossible, except in the various forms of response simulation, themselves integrated in the transmission process, thus leaving the unilateral nature of the communication intact. This is the real abstraction of the media, and the system of social control and power is rooted in it. To understand the term response properly, we must take it in an emphatic sense by referring to an equivalent in primitive societies. Power belongs to the one who can give and cannot be repaid. To give, and to do it in such a way that one is unable to repay, is to disrupt the exchange to your profit and to institute a monopoly. The social process is thus thrown out of equilibrium, whereas repaying disrupts this power relationship and institutes or reinstitutes on the basis of an antagonistic reciprocity the circuit of symbolic exchange. The same goes for the media. They speak, or something is spoken there, but in such a way as to exclude any response anywhere. This is why the only revolution in this domain, indeed the revolution everywhere, the revolution tout court, lies in restoring this possibility of response. But such a simple possibility presupposes an upheaval in the entire existing structure of the media. No other theory or strategy is possible. All vague impulses to democratize content, subvert it, restore the, quote, transparency of the code, unquote, control the information process, contrive a reversibility of circuits, or take power over media are hopeless unless the monopoly of speech is broken. And one cannot break the monopoly of speech if one's goal is simply to distribute it equally to everyone. Speech must be able to exchange, give, and repay itself, as is occasionally the case with looks and smiles. It cannot simply be interrupted, congealed, stockpiled, and redistributed in some corner of the social process. For the time being, we live in the era of non-response, of irresponsibility. Quote, minimal autonomous activity on the part of the spectator and voter, unquote, says Ensensberg. The mass media par excellence, and the most beautiful of them all, is the electoral system. Its crowning achievement is the referendum, where the response is implied in the question itself, as in polls. It is a speech that answers itself via the simulated detour of a response. And here as well, the absolutization of speech under the formal guise of exchange is the definition of power. Roland Barthes has made note of the same non-reciprocity in literature. Quote, our literature is characterized by the pitiless divorce which the literary institution maintains between the producer of the text and its user, between its owner and customer, between its author and its reader. This reader is thereby plunged into a kind of idleness. He is intransitive. He is, in short, serious. Instead of functioning himself, instead of gaining access to the magic of the signifier, to the pleasure of writing, he is left with no more than the freedom either to accept or reject the text. Reading is nothing more than a referendum, unquote. Today, the status of the consumer defines this banishment. The generalized order of consumption is nothing other than that sphere where it is no longer permitted to give, to reimburse, or to exchange, but only to take and to make use of, appropriation, individualized use value. In this case, consumption goods also constitute a mass medium. They answer to the general state of affairs we have described. Their specific function is of little import. The consumption of products and messages is the abstract social relation that they establish, the ban raised against all forms of response and reciprocity. Thus, it is far from true that, as Ensensberg affirms, quote, for the first time in history, the media makes possible a mass participation in a productive social process, unquote, nor that, quote, the practical means of this participation are in the hands of the masses themselves, unquote. As if owning a TV set or a camera inaugurated a new possibility of relationship and exchange. Strictly speaking, such cases are no more significant than the possession of a refrigerator or toaster. There is no response to a functional object. Its function is already there, an integrated speech to which it has already responded, leaving no room for play or reciprocal putting in play, unless one destroys the object or turns its function inside out. So the functionalized object, like all messages functionalized by the media, like the operation of a referendum, controls rupture, the emergence of meaning, and censorship. As an extreme case, authority would provide every citizen with a TV set without preoccupying itself with programming, assuming an authority that was not also obsessed by content and convinced of the ideological force of media persuasion, and thus of the need to control the message. It is useless to fantasize about the state projection of police control through TV, as Enzensberger has remarked of Orwell's 1984. TV, by virtue of its mere presence, is a social control in itself. There is no need to imagine it as a state periscope spying on everyone's private life. The situation as it stands is more efficient than that. It is the certainty that people are no longer speaking to each other, that they are definitely isolated in the fact of a speech without response. From this perspective, McLuhan, whom Enzensberger scorns as a kind of ventriloquist, is much closer to a theory when he declares that, quote, the medium is the massage, unquote, save that in his total blindness to the social forms discussed here, he exalts the media and their global message with a delirious tribal optimism. The medium is the massage is not a critical proposition, but in its paradoxical form it has analytic value, whereas the ingenuity of Enzensberger with regard to the, quote, structural properties of the media, unquote, such that, quote, no power can permit the liberation of their potentiality, unquote, turns out to be mysticism, although it wants to be revolutionary. The mystique of the socialist predestination of the media is opposite, but complementary to the Orwellian myth of their terrorist manipulation by authority. Even God would approve of socialism. Christians say it all the time.